Hello, I'm Paul Campbell for Make CNC Workshops TV, MakeCNC.com and LaserScroll.com. Today I'm going to be talking about using Make CNC and Laser Scroll patterns with a scroll saw. Many years ago when Make CNC started, we created our patterns primarily for people with CNC routers to cut out the parts and make the models. As time went by, other people started picking up our patterns and using them with different machines like plasma cutters out of metal, laser cutting machines as they came down in price, electronic die cutting machines like the Silver Bullet, the Cricut and the Silhouette, and also even some people started doing them with X-Acto knives and cardboard, so it's pretty cool. And during that time, a few people like yourselves started picking up our patterns and cutting them on a scroll saw by printing out the pattern onto a piece of paper and sticking it to a piece of wood. That all sounds easy, but there was a few catches when it comes to our patterns that don't fit your normal scroll saw type pattern situation. And how to deal with that is something that I'm going to be talking about in this video. Okay, first off, we couldn't convert all our patterns over so that all parts were printable on a single page. You know, we couldn't fit 300 parts onto a page to start off with, but let's say we've got a model with 50 parts and some of those parts are larger than the size page that your printer prints out. So that was a problem, okay, and we created PDFs and we found a workaround where you can print in what they call the poster option in a PDF, and that prints the pages out, or at least the pattern out, over multiple pages. And if you select cut marks, it gives you registration marks that you can use to line up the pieces after you've printed them out and glue them to paper. That can be quite a tedious job on some of the bigger patterns that have a lot of parts. But and it's also unavoidable if you're going to be doing big things like our dollhouse patterns. But probably about 80 to 90% of our patterns, the parts will fit onto A4 pages, but you have to lay them out individually. Now, for us to have done that work to thousands of patterns so that you can use it with a scroll saw would have taken so much time that we'd have had to raise the price of our patterns by about tenfold just to cover the cost of actually trying to do that. So what I'm going to do here today is show you how to use a free program called Inkscape. Now, if you're a scroll saw user, learning how to use this program is a pretty major thing that you should do. You don't have to learn all the ins and outs of Inkscape for it to do the jobs that you need. You just have to learn to use the tools that are specific to the tasks that you want, so it's not quite as daunting as you might think. But first of all, I'm going to show you, for those that don't know and don't like reading instructions, I'm going to show you how to print out our patterns using PDFs that come supplied, the scroll saw PDF that comes supplied with our patterns, and using the poster option in your software. So we'll get on to that right now. Okay, so if you've watched our other video on how to purchase, find and download our patterns and open them up, you'll know how to get to this point that I've got on the screen here, where I have the scroll saw version of the PDF that's in the file package open on the screen, and once again our friendly little anatomically correct dinosaur is our example. So when you open the PDF, you're going to see this. So if we scroll down, you got your cover page. This is typical of a Make CNC or laser scroll pattern. There's going to be some information about printing it out, which I'm just going to skip over here because we're going to use this video to show you how. There's some information on rescaling as well, which you can read if you need it, or watch our scale video. And then it's showing the 1/8 inch version of the scroll saw. You can't see all of that on the screen, so I'm going to size that down a little bit so that we can actually see it. We have a metric version and we have a imperial version. Alrighty, so we're seeing that if we count the pages, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Now on page 4 is the 1/8 of an inch version, and that's the one that we're going to want to print out in this case. Okay, now that's fairly large. You're not going to be able to print that on a single page, okay? And that's the reason, by the way, that I'm making this video on how to use Inkscape, to show you some cool methods of dealing with our patterns that will make your life a whole lot more fun with our patterns and your scroll saw. So I'm going to come over here to File, and I'm going to say Print. Okay, now in most cases and on most printers, not all, some of them are a little bit odd, you should get a dialog box that looks pretty much like this when you want to go and print it out. And in this case, I'm using an Epson printer to print my PDF. But most printers are going to pop up a PDF printing dialog box that looks somewhat like this. Okay, so once we're in here, now if you look at this, it's not going to print correctly. Okay, so rather than go through all the details of what it should or shouldn't do, or left or right, I'm just going to tell you the method so you can get on with it. Okay, so we remember this was page 4, so we're going to come over here, click Pages. We're going to change that to page 4. We're going to choose Poster, okay, and we're going to highlight cut marks, and in my case I like landscape, so I'm going to use landscape. Alrighty, now if you look over here, you can see what it's going to do. It's going to print out 12 pages to get this pattern out at 3mm. So if you scale this pattern up, it's going to be a lot more pages. But anyway, you can see that the way the pattern is currently laid out, that's what it's going to print, and it's going to have cut marks, which are basically registration marks that will help you line up the pattern when it's printed. And I'm just going to hit print, and off it goes to my printer, and out come the pages, and you reline them all up using the registration marks, and that's pretty much it. But if you continue to watch this video, you're going to find out a much cooler way of doing things that's going to give you a lot more power and control, and make things a lot easier for you to use our patterns with your scroll saw. So we'll see you in a second. Okay, so just before I get going on this tutorial, I just want to show the newcomers who have not used our website who we are. We're Make CNC, and on our site here you can see you can purchase and download our digital patterns for 3D puzzles, 3D models, and other things. We also have a site, Laser Scroll, where we publish other people's works, but we put them through our quality control, so they're just as good a quality as Make CNC, and they have our customer support as well. You can purchase these from Laser Scroll. Okay, and if you feel inclined, please subscribe to our channel. That helps us keep making more videos for you. And of course, you go to Facebook and like our pages and join our Facebook groups if you want information about our products. Okay, so that's that. So right, let's rock and roll here. Okay, so first things first, you probably, if you've never bought a Make CNC pattern or a Laser Scroll pattern before, you should probably go watch our video on how to purchase, find, and download our patterns, and also open them. In that video, you'll find out how to get Adobe Acrobat Reader to open the PDF documents, among other things that you should know before you start using our patterns with Scroll Saw. So here we are at Inkscape's homepage. You can find that or get to that by clicking on the link that I show in the description down the bottom there. Once you're at Inkscape's homepage, you can see a whole bunch of options here. You can download it for Windows, or you can download it for your Mac. Something to know now about Inkscape is that it's a vector drawing package, which means it uses lines to make up the images, as opposed to something like Photoshop, which uses raster, which means little pixels or little dots make up the image, just like a digital photograph. Now, the cool thing about vector graphics is that because they're lines, you can scale them up without losing any resolution. So whereas if you get a raster graphic or an image photograph like a JPEG or something like that, the more that you scale that up, the more blurry and pixelated that's going to become. So in scroll saw use, you're probably using raster graphics to have patterns and print them out and cut them out, but you've probably found that sometimes you'll download a pattern and you'll try to scale it up and it'll be yucky. Well, that's because it's a raster graphic. And there are ways actually using Inkscape to convert raster graphics over to vector graphics to allow you to scale up or down, but that comes in another video. In this video, we're going to stick to how to use our patterns with Inkscape. Okay, we're going to install Inkscape on the computer. So in this case, let's just say we're going to install Windows. So click on Windows. And I've got a bunch of options here. Now, if you've got a modern computer, then you want to do 64-bit. If you're still way back running Windows XP, then you might want to choose 32-bit. But if you're running Windows 7 or Windows 10, you want 64-bit. So you click on the 64-bit. Now, you've got a couple of options here. You want to choose Installer in exe format, okay? It's going to be the easiest for you to deal with. So click on that. And we click on that. Oh, okay, download started. Okay, so now Windows is going to open up and say, where do I want to store that? In this case, I'm just going to store it in Paul's videos, which is the folder I'm using to create this video for you guys. So now you see down the bottom here that it's actually saving that program, and that is 675 megabytes. Okay, so, and it's or is it 67? 67.5, sorry. Alrighty, so Inkscape is now downloaded, and if I click on that icon down the left-hand corner here, you can see that this little image comes up, and I'm using Windows 10, okay guys? I'm going to go yes, and then this little critter is going to come up, and I'm going to say, okay, I'm speaking English, so I want English. And then we see this one, it says welcome to Inkscape. We click next. It's asking us if we agree with the license agreement. And actually, you know what, just to be standard, let's just click next again. Let's put it in a standard folder that they tell it, and starts to install. Now, most of you can sort of skip past this because you know how to install a program, but for those of you that don't do this often, this is probably helpful. So it's worth the wait here, folks. Yawn. All right, so it's done. So it's going to say, do you want to run Inkscape? And we're going to say yes. And there it is. It opens Inkscape for the first time. I opened on my other screen because I've got a dual screen monitor system, so I'm just sizing it up here. And this is what you see when Inkscape opens, okay? So here we are with Inkscape opened in all its glory. As you can see, there are lots of little icons and things to do with this software, but don't be daunted, okay? Because we're only going to use some very special parts of this program to achieve the result. So it's pretty easy once you follow our method, step by step. And another thing, though, of course, you know, you should learn as much about this program as you can, because you can do all sorts of amazing things for your patterns and scroll saw use using Inkscape. All right. Now, when you've downloaded our patterns, you'll see that there's a scroll saw PDF folder. But in this case, we're not going to be using the scroll saw PDF, because we want to be able to break apart and arrange the parts and do various things with them. Now there's a couple of other formats. One is called DXF, but that's sort of more used in CNC router or plasma type cutting software. Typically for scroll saw type patterns that are in vector format, SVG or scalable vector format is probably the best option, and we're going to use that option in this tutorial. So the first thing we want to do, and by the way, of course, like I said, you should have watched the video on how to download and save our patterns and how to find them on our website before you try to do this. Okay, so you're going to know where your pattern is what I'm saying. So we go to File, and we say Import. Actually, you know what? I'm going to cancel that. And first of all, we want to set up our document so we know what our size, our measurement system is, whether it's inch or millimeters. If you're out of the US, you'll be using millimeters more than likely. If you're in the US, you'll be using inch. If you don't set up your document format correctly at this point, then your patterns won't import to scale and your slot sizes will be wrong. So we go to File, Document Properties, okay, and then we have a little window here in our document properties that allows us to set up this page. This is the page or the area of your document that's going to be printed, all right? So if we happen to be, I'm going to use inch because I'm in the US, and I'm going to select, if you're in the UK, you might use A4. Your printer's going to probably be an A4 printer. So we're going to select US letter. Now that changes. If you actually watch me slip there and there, you can see that that page size is changing on the screen, okay? So I'm going to choose US letter for the United States. And if we come down and look at the other options here, I've got portrait or landscape. That depends on how the orientation of how I want it to print out. In this case, I'm going to use, actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to choose landscape because I like working with landscape. It's up to you how you do it. Okay, now over here, units. Now this is incredibly important. If you happen to live in the United States, you want those units set to inch. If you happen to live in the UK or other places that use metric, New Zealand, Aussie, places like that, you'll choose millimeters, okay? So that's important to choose the correct format of measurement for the software so that it knows how to set itself up. Otherwise, your patterns are going to be out of scale when you import. So in this case, we're set to inch. We'll look down, scale, okay, we don't that. We don't need any of that stuff. So we go, okay, well, that looks pretty good. So we can now close that out, and our page is set up, all right? So now we're going to go back, and we're going to go to File, Import, and I've defaulted to the folder where the file that I want to work with is, but you may have to navigate around your computer to wherever you saved it and watched our video about how to do that is on your computer. And in this case, I'm going to use the trusty anatomically correct T-Rex. Select that file, and I'm going to go Open. Okay, so this is what turns up on the screen when you first do that. Now you can see that it's a whole bunch of parts, and actually we can't see the whole pattern. Okay, so we're going to want to move that pattern across. But before we do that, what I want to do is show you how to manipulate the image or the pattern on the screen. Now, if you go to the center wheel of your mouse and you just roll it backwards and forwards, you can see it scrolls the page up and down, okay? In this case, that's not what we want it to do, but that's handy to know that the scrolling wheel will move the page up and down. But if you hold down your Control key on your keyboard and do exactly the same thing, it now zooms in and out. Okay, so you can now zoom in and out, and now we can see the whole pattern. But as you can see, this is the page size, and of course our whole pattern doesn't fit on the page size. Now with our PDF, normal scroll saw PDF, you get around this by printing multiple pages, but those pages will cut off pieces of the pattern, and they put registration marks so that you can actually lay this all out and use the registration marks to line it up and put it all back together. But that can be a real pain. But sometimes when you've got big things like our mansion files, you're really not going to have much choice but to do it that way. But in 90% of the cases, when you're using 3mm or 1/8 of an inch material, you're going to be able to fit individual parts onto the page and print out on your normal letter size or A4 printer. Okay, so now that we've got this pattern here sitting on the screen like this, I want to be able to move that around. Okay, so if I click on that, it goes away. If I click again, it comes back. Now if I click and hold, oops, sorry, if I double click, sorry, and hold, I can move the entire group of parts. Now let's try that again. So we're out here, I come in, I click on it, and then I click and hold, my left mouse button by the way. I can move around the whole group of parts. One more time, okay? It's not selected now. We click, select it, and we click again and hold, left mouse button. We can move the group around. Okay, now something I should show you as well. You can see these little arrows here. Don't touch these little arrows, because if you size this drawing up or down at the moment, you click and drag that, what's going to happen is you're going to alter the slot size on the parts, and then now when you go to print them out and cut it out, you're going to have these the wrong size for the thickness of your wood, and in this case it's 1/8 of an inch. These slots are 1/8 of an inch. Then you're going to have the wrong size for the material that you're using, and nothing will fit together. Something I should mention at this point as well, and that is when you go buy a piece of 1/8 of an inch material, or any material from your hardware store for that matter, it's probably not going to really be 1/8 of an inch. In other words, and 1/8 of an inch is 0.125 thickness in decimals. Okay, so something important to understand is you probably should get yourself a set of digital calipers. I mean, you can buy them these days for $10 or something at Harbour Freight or whatever your local hardware store is that sells that sort of thing. And you should measure the real thickness of your material and write that down on a piece of paper, and you should rescale this drawing so that those slot sizes are exactly the thickness of your material. Now, if you want to be able to learn how to do that, we have a video on how to use our scale calculator with Inkscape, so that you can scale your pattern up or down so those slot sizes are exactly the right size for your material. So that's another video. You should go watch that if you want to be able to scale up or down. Okay, but for this video we don't need to do that. But if I click again here, now if I click again, you'll see over here that these little arrows appear on the corner. That's after I click twice. Okay, now if I grab that and I start dragging it, holding down my left mouse button, I can rotate, okay, all those parts. Alrighty, and holding down my control key, zooming out, zooming in. You see how you can sort of get around there just using the scroll wheel on the control key. Okay, so that's to be able to rotate parts, and you'll notice that it's rotating all of these parts as a group. Okay, well in this case we don't want to have all of these parts as a group, so we're just going to click off here, and that's because we want to be able to individually move and lay out these parts on the page as much as we can fit to print out on a single page on our little A4 printer or our letter size printer. Alrighty, so I'm just going to hit edit, and I'm going to go undo rotate, and I'm going to go, okay, well, I just undo rotate, and that's just bringing everything back to square. A really cool thing to note, undo. If you make a mistake, usually you can just hit undo and go back, and it'll go back how many undos you need to get back to where you made the mistake, so you don't have to start everything from scratch, which is something pretty cool to know. Okay, so now we're ready to try and lay out our parts so that we can get them ready to print on our printer. So in this case, I'm going to click, and I'm going to hold, and I'm going to drag all the parts off the screen, or at least off the page. All right, so we want to break these apart. So the easiest way to do that is to go click and then right click. Okay, and down the bottom here you'll see ungroup. Okay, so once again, show you that again. Click, then right click, and that is, sorry, I'm going to show you that again, you know. Left click on your mouse button, then right click, and then scroll down and click left click, ungroup. So you'll see what's happened is all the parts now have got a little bounding box around them all. That means that the whole lot have all been ungrouped. And if we click out of here, it looks the same, but if I click one part now, it just selects that part. Be very, very careful, like I said, and that's don't scale this up or down because you'll change the slot size. You've got to be very careful. But the same rules apply. You can move this around the same way that I showed you before. It's also important to note that if we just hold down our control key and we zoom in, say, to the T-Rex's head part here, you can see that there's an outside and that there's an inside. Now, if I click on this T-Rex, all it's going to do is it's going to, actually, you know what, I'm just going to do a quick test here. If I move that, you see it moves without taking all of those because it ungrouped all of the parts. So it sees all of these as separate parts. Okay, let's go back and undo move. Okay, so now we want all of those parts. So we're going to click on that fella there, and then we're going to hold down the shift key, and we're going to click each one. Okay, each one. And then we're going to right click and we're going to group those. So now if I hold down my key and I drag it, it drags all the parts together because we've regrouped them. So whenever you see parts with a slot, say, within the part, then you might want to, after you've done your main ungroup, you might want to come along, click the part, hold down the shift key, click the internal parts one by one, in this case only one, right click and group. Then once you've done all that, holding down the control key and zooming out with our scroll wheel, once you've done all that to any parts that have parts inside or holes inside the part, it's going to make it much easier to deal with when we start moving them onto the page, where you're not leaving things behind or you're not moving the position of any slots or anything so that it screws up how things fit together on your pattern. So very important to do that. Okay, that's a little bit of futzing around, but as I go through this tutorial, you're going to find out that it's worth it, because by the time we've finished here, you're going to be able to have all of this laid out the way you want it in multiple pages, and you'll be able to export that and turn it into a PDF so that you can put that away, and anytime you want to make this pattern, instead of having to come back and do all this sort of thing again, you'll be able to just go print on that PDF and it'll print out the 10 pages or whatever it takes to print out the pattern in the way that you've set it up for your particular use or printer. Alrighty, so now coming back here, I'm going to choose a part and I'm going to drag it. So I'm sitting there. Now remember I showed you how to do that. Okay, so we click and we hold that and then we drag it onto the page. Okay, and then we get the next one. Click and hold and drag it onto the page. Click and hold and drag it onto the page. Okay, so you can do that with any of these parts and lay them out to fit exactly how you want or what's best for your particular printer or your particular need. And once you've done that and you've got all the parts laid out onto a single page that you can fit in there, then you can print it out as a PDF or save it as a PDF for later use here, and I'm going to show you what that is. But before we get into that, I want to make sure that when this does print out, that the lines that we see, if we just scroll in here and look at this, the lines that we see here, when it prints out, we want those lines to print out so that we can actually see them, so that they're thick enough to see, but not so thick that it messes up the size of the slot for you to see when you're coming in here to cut with your scroll saw. And the way that we set that up is we use the stroke. That's in other software it's called something else, but in this software it's called the stroke. And if we hit Control, Shift and F on our keyboard, you'll see a window pop up here. Okay, now you can find that in the toolbar as well, but Control, Shift and F is the fastest way to find it on your keyboard. So now we click on stroke style, and let's just scroll out here so that we should have done this really at the beginning of this, and you can do that, but I'm going to, if I click outside here and I hold down my left mouse button and then I drag this window across all of the parts, okay, all of the parts, and I let go, it selects all of the parts, okay. Now over here, once they're all selected, over here, and you can do this, by the way, when everything's grouped together at the beginning, so I'm sort of a little bit back to front here. It doesn't really matter when you do this, as long as you do it before you save it to print out. Okay, so in width, that's mainly what we're dealing with here. We want in there 0.25. And in this case, we want that to be millimeters. Okay, we want it 0.25 millimeters because we just want a really tiny line. You can say inches, but then it would be 1/4 of an inch, which is huge. So just leave it at millimeters. Always just leave it at millimeters. I think will be easiest. And you want, of course, a hard line, so you can just leave that alone. Okay, so then once that's done, the lines are now going to be visible when you print them out on a page. Okay, so back to this. So once we've got a whole bunch of, I'm scrolling in here, holding down my control key. Once we've got a whole bunch of parts laid out the way we want them, then the next thing we're going to do is go to File, and we're going to go Export, or actually we'll go Save As. Okay, and down the bottom right here, we're going to say we want to save that as a PDF, a portable document format, PDF, alrighty? And we're going to give it a name down here, and we'll type in page 1 Dino, okay? So we're going to call it page 1 underscore Dino, and I'm going to save that in my desktop, in Paul's videos, scroll saw tutorial. And okay, so it's saying embedded fonts. Yeah, we'll leave that. PDF 125. Yes. I think, you know, we can leave that at 96 DPI. Yep, that looks good. Don't think we have to change that. Okay, so that's now saved out as a PDF, and we're going to be using that PDF later. So the next thing you want to do is make your next page. So you lay out your parts onto the paper as many as you can fit, save it out as page 2 Dino PDF. So in the end, you're going to have a whole bunch of pages of PDFs ready to print out from your on your printer. But before you do that, we're going to cover something else, and that is this. Okay, so if we move these, we'll select all of these like I showed you, click drag around, it gets all of them. We'll move that over here, and we'll take a part here like this one here, which is the tail, and we're going to drag that onto the screen, and we can see, oopsie days, that doesn't fit. All right, so now we want to click twice, and we're going to rotate that, and then we're going to drag, click that and drag it, and we're going to mess around with that and see if we can't get that to fit. That does look like it fits. Okay, so sometimes rotating a part will allow you to make it fit on the screen, whereas if it's laid flat or in a different position, it might not. And it also leaves you some room to be dropping in some of these other parts onto the screen, so you get the best use of your paper. Okay, and then you'll save that out, like I said, like you did the first one I just showed you, as a PDF, and you'll give it like page 2 Dino if that's what you want to do. Alrighty, so and you keep doing that until you've got how many ever pages that you need to get the whole pattern out there. So I hope all this is making some sense. Okay, at this stage I'm going to just regroup a little here and go over what we've learned. Okay, so we've learned to import a pattern, we've learned to move the pattern around on the screen, we've learned to set up the page to the measurements and size that we need for our particular printer and our country of origin. We've learned to break up the pattern into its various components and move those components onto the printable page, and then save that out as a PDF or series of PDFs that we're later going to combine into one PDF to make it easy to print out. Now, once we've done those things, we're going to inevitably, sooner or later, come across a part that is just plain too big to fit onto the page. And like in some of our dollhouse patterns and things are fairly big, and so they're going to have to be printed over multiple pages. And to do that, we use a printer's trick called registration marks. Now, to be able to use registration marks, of course, we've got to actually make a registration mark, and that uses some of the drawing tools in Inkscape. And I am going to make a link to a free pattern that you can import of a registration mark if you don't want to go through this process. But it's no harm to learn how to use these tools, because they're going to make your life easier using Inkscape in the long run. But if you just want to be plain quick, just go to the link below and you can download a registration mark and import that and use that in your program. Alrighty, so we're just going to do a transition here and transition magically to how to make a registration mark. Alrighty, so here we are in a nice fresh clean opening of Inkscape, and I've set the page up to inch and I've made it landscape, and I'm ready to go. So to make a registration mark, I'm going to first create a circle. So if we go over here to the left, hold down the control key, because I want this circle to remain symmetric and not turn into ellipse. Let me just quickly show you what I'm talking about. If I click on the circle and I don't hold down the control key, it's very easy for that circle to come out as an ellipse or a distorted circle, okay? Which we don't want, and of course it's black, which we're going to get rid of shortly here, but so I'm going to delete that. Now, by the way, your main tool in Inkscape is this tool up here on the left, which is the Select and Transform Objects tool. So, and when everything else goes wrong, always go back to this. That's your main tool, and that allows you to select and do all the things that you need to do with the selection of your particular object. So in this case, I don't want this circle because it's not correct. So I'm going to delete it, and then I'm going to come back over here to the circle tool, select that, and this time I'm going to hold down the control key, which makes the circle more concentric. So I'm just going to click once, drag it. Okay, and I guess that's big enough. Just going to let go, and that's that done. And then I'm going to go back up and get my selection tool back, and I've got the circle now. Let's just say I created it over here. Now the first thing I need to do is I don't need a black circle. Okay, I need a clear circle, so I'm going to want to get rid of that black fill. I need a line, in other words. And to do that, I'm going to go Control Shift F, and that's going to bring up my fill and stroke window over here. I'm going to click onto fill, and then I'm going to click the X, and you'll see over here that that now takes out the fill and just leaves me the line, which is what I want. If I go to stroke style, it's already set to 0.250 millimeters. That's okay. That's fine. So now I'm going to close that. Now, I want to put that into the center of the screen. And there's a reason that I want to put that into the center of the screen, because I want to be able to line objects up absolutely perfectly. And so just dragging it like I did, showing you the methods I used before, is never going to get me exactly in the center of the screen. So let's just move that over here to show you this example. Now in this particular case, what we want to do is use the tools in Inkscape, and these tools are in most drawing programs too, by the way, but use this tool. This tool is called the Align and Distribute tool, and what it's used for is moving things to the center or aligning it with other objects or sides of the page or whatever. But we're only going to use two parts of the Align and Distribute tool in this example to make our registration mark. And the way that we open the Align and Distribute dialog is Control Shift A. Okay, and that brings up our Align and Distribute dialog. That's Control Shift A. All right, now we're going to set it to Select Page. Now this is a very powerful tool for aligning objects on the screen, but we only need to use a couple of them in our example here for Make CNC patterns. But you may want to play around with this and learn how to use it really well, because it's very powerful and you'll be able to use it later on in other pieces of your scroll saw work that are not related to necessarily to Make CNC's products. But okay, so within all of the different tools, there are two that we're going to use. And if we just hover over this one, it says center on vertical axis. Okay, that means it's going to center the object on the screen on the vertical axis, and then we're going to use the center on the horizontal axis as well, and that's going to get us exactly in the center of the screen. So we come over here and we click on our circle and we hit the first one, center on vertical axis, go. So that centers our line, our object, sorry, on the vertical axis. And we're going to go below and say center on horizontal axis. And now our circle is perfectly in the center of the screen. And there's a reason that we need that. Okay, and I'll show you that right now. By the way, to get out of a command like this, you can just hit the escape key and then come over here and your select tool and you're back where you need to be. Okay, so now that we've got our circle on the screen and it's perfectly centered, we need to create a cross here, that circle, so that it's perfectly centered so that our registration mark will be accurate. To do that, we need to come across to the left here and select the line tool. Okay, that's the one in the middle between the orange one and the pen tool. That's the line tool. We click on that, and then we come over to the center and we hold down our control key. The reason we hold the control key down is because once we click once, if we move our mouse around, you can see that the control key is snapping. Okay, or sorry, that it's snapping because I'm holding the control key. Okay, if I didn't hold the control key, then it's just going to move around anywhere it wants to be. But if I hold the control key down, it will snap so that we can get a perfectly straight line on the page. So once we've done that, holding the control key down, we click once and then we press enter. Now that's created our line. We can take our hands off the control key and then we'll go back up and we'll click on our selection tool and we're ready for the next part of it. Okay, so I want to click on that, select it, and then I want to go Control C, which means copy. You could use the edit, copy and paste if you want, but Control C is a quick way to do it. And then I want to go Control V, which means paste, and that gives me another line that's identical to this line. And I want to move that line over here. And now I want to rotate that line so that it's perfectly horizontal. Okay, then to do that, I'm going to click on it again, and I've got the rotate command there. You can see the little arrows. So if I hold down the control key again, it's going to snap as I turn it around, as I rotate it. So it's not just free rotating. You see how it's snapping? So once I've got it perfectly horizontal, I can let that control key go and let that, oops, no, don't want to do that. Let it undo rotate. We'll try that again. Need to keep the control key held down. So we get it flat, then we let it go, then take our finger off the control key and we've got a perfectly flat line. Alrighty, so now we want to position those on the page correctly. So we're going to first of all select our vertical line and we're going to center it vertically, and then we're going to over here on the align and distribute, and then we're going to center it horizontally. And so now it's in exactly the right place. We're going to click on the horizontal line and we're going to center it vertically on the page, and then we're going to up here click center it horizontally. So now for all intents and purposes we have a perfect registration mark. So what we want to do with using the methods I showed you earlier is drag all of that over with a box so that we select everything at once. We want to right click, scroll down, group, then we have a registration mark. The next thing we want to do with this registration mark is we want to save it, file, save it out. And we're going to save that as an SVG file so that we can always come back to it and use it no matter what pattern we're dealing with. We don't have to do this again. We only have to do it once in our life and we've got a registration mark. And that is a scalable registration mark. So we're just going to call it reg mark. and it's done. Okay, so I'm going to minimize this one. So now we're back over in our pattern version that we opened earlier of Inkscape, and we want to import that registration mark into this pattern set that we're working on. And that's the one that you either created using the process I showed you or the one that you downloaded. So to do that, we're going to go File, Import, and we're going to navigate to where we saved that or wherever you downloaded it to. And in my case, I'm going to grab it off the desktop, and we see reg mark here. Okay, and I go open. Okay, so now it's opened up my registration mark, and importing means it'll bring it in with. Don't try to go open. Okay, if you go File, Open, then it's going to open up a whole new document. You want to import to make sure that you can bring in this vector graphic into another group of vector graphics that you're using. So something very important to understand the difference between open and the difference between import. Okay. Another thing too is, and that is, you don't want to double click on something to try and open it in a piece of software like a SVG or a DXF or anything like that. You always want to use the import function in your software, otherwise you will find that you'll have issues trying to get the pattern to open. All right. So now that we have the registration mark in our software, we want to size that down to something that's usable for this particular situation. I'm going to hold down my control key, and I'm going to zoom in close so I can see what's going on here. And then I'll let go of the control key. I'm going to grab the scale, and I'm going to hold down the control key again because I want to uniformly scale that down. And I'm going to scale this down to something that I figure is good for a size for a registration mark. Okay. Now, you can have that registration mark however big you want, depending on what you're trying to pull in to the page, by the way. And we need to make more than one of those. So we're going to go Control C again, and then we're going to go Control V, and that's going to make a copy of it because we need a couple of registration marks on our page when we lay out the part that won't fit for our printing purposes. Okay, remember, this is the printable area. Nothing over here that you see on the outside of that. I'll scroll out here. When you go to your printer, it doesn't see that. The printer only sees this area as printable. Okay, even if you save it out as a PDF. So it's important to remember. Alrighty, so we've got that those registration marks in there. And you know something, I'm just going to change the stroke style on those because I'm going to go Control Shift F to pull up my stroke, and I just want to check that out. Now you see it says width 0 millimeters. I was wondering that because I could hardly see that, whereas I could see these. So I'm going to change that to 0.25 millimeters and hit enter. And now all of a sudden you can see it. Okay, I'm going to grab my other one, do the same with that. You should probably do this before you actually copy and paste. Just something I noticed as I went along there, and that can happen when you import a new graphic or a new vector into an existing project that you're working on. So something to remember, always check that. Alright, now we'll be able to see our registration marks fine on screen, and we have a couple here. Okay, so now we're ready to select our part that is larger than the printable page and use our registration marks to create two PDFs that we're going to later combine so that we can print out two pieces of paper with a piece each of the big part and then realign them using the registration marks so that we can stick them on the wood and cut them out with our scroll saw. So for this example here, I'm going to be using this tail part of the T-Rex, and actually if I just click that and drag it across, you can see that there's a piece sticking out each end. Now you know from earlier in the tutorial that if I rotate that I can actually fit it on the printable page, but for this example we're going to pretend that we can't do that. So alright, so we'll bring this back here and we want to make a little bit of room to work. So I'm going to select these other parts by dragging a box around them and selecting them all. And you recall that I showed you how to do that earlier in the tutorial. and then I'm going to click on a part area and drag away those parts that we don't want to be working with right now, and then let go the right mouse button, and there they sit. Something to remember, and that is when you see me hover over those, okay, you can see a little cross below the cursor. So when you don't see that cross, it means you haven't got it over the part properly, and if you click and hold that and try to drag that part, it won't move. So just watch the cross disappear, reappear, reappear, disappear. So just make sure that that cross is visible, otherwise it can get very frustrating. You think you're clicking on the group of parts and they won't move, and it can get very annoying. It's just a little detail that can drive you up a tree unless you understand that tiny detail. So that's something to remember. Alrighty, so now back over here with our tail. What we're going to do is we're going to grab our tail and just position it here, and then we're going to go in and grab our first registration mark, and we will drop that just here. And positioning, of course, of registration marks is all dependent on what it is that you're trying to print out and how many pages. Some of them you might have to do 2 or 3, but this is the process that I'm showing you, and you can position the registration marks where they're required using this method. So really it's a method that I'm showing you rather than it's always this way exactly, but you'll get the picture. Okay, so now we've got them in the right place for this example, and I'm going to drag a box over those, and then I'm going to right click and I'm going to group them so that now when I move them, I can move them all around as a group. Okay, so the next thing I have to do to make this work, this method work, is I have to position the first half of the tail on the screen. So registration marks are showing, and that part of the tail is on the printable area, and this part isn't. Okay, now there's something important to remember here. To make sure everything lines up correctly later on when we print it out, we've got to make sure this is aligned correctly on the page in the horizontal in this case. So to do that, we're going to need the align and distribute tools again. So if we just go Control, Shift and A, on the right hand side here you'll see it brings up the align and distribute box, and we've got it set relative to page because that's what we want to do. If we hover again over that, we can see center on the vertical axis. We don't want to do that because that's going to move the whole drawing into a different position, but we do want to center it on the horizontal axis. So we click that now, and that just moved that slightly, but it keeps it in perfectly in the horizontal plane. And now we're going to go over and File, Save As. We're going to come over here to the right. Oops, sorry. We're going to come over to the right and choose Portable Document Format, and we're going to give that a name, and that name will be Big Part 1, and we're going to go Save. And when we've got this dialog, okay, we don't need to do anything with that. And it says I already have one because I've done this before. Replace. Okay, so now I've saved a PDF of this, what we can see here of the printable page. Now I want to set it up for page 2, which is going to later be combined into one PDF that we can print out with the whole pattern. And so I'm going to grab my T-Rex tail. I'm just going to drag it across here, keeping my registration marks on the screen. Now when I clicked and dragged that, you see I'm probably moving that, you know, up or down very slightly in the horizontal plane, and so if I tried printing that out, then those things wouldn't line up. That's why it's important that once I've got that position so that this part of the tail is now in the printable area, I come back up again and then I go center on the horizontal. You see how that dropped down a little bit there. So what that does is it makes it between PDF 1, Big Part 1, and then Big Part 2. It means those registration marks are in exactly the right place so that they'll line up after they're printed out, and we hold them up to the light and or put them on a light box and line up the pages. And by the way, you can pick up a light box, an A3 light box for pretty cheap on eBay to do it if you don't want to be holding things up to the light and you're doing all sorts of pattern work with scroll saws. They can be really handy for for lining up registration marks, not just on our patterns, but on any patterns that are larger than what your printer will print out, because you can use this method for that. You could also make one, by the way. You just make one out of wood and get some LEDs and a piece of probably fairly translucent acrylic, and that will work just as good. Alrighty, so once again, we come back and we go Save As, and we come over here and save it as a portable document format, and we click Big Part 2, or you type in Big Part 2, go Save, OK. Replace in my case, yours it won't be that. Alrighty, so now we have both pages ready to go, and we're going to move on to the part of the video where I show you how to combine a whole bunch of these PDFs that we've saved into one PDF, so you can use them at any time you want to print out your entire pattern, everything that you've done in the tutorial, and then you don't have to do this work over and over each time you want to do it. Once it's all done, you can file that away in your hard drive, and anytime you want to make the T-Rex or whatever pattern it is you've set up for your particular printer and purpose and make CNC, you can do that. And I hope you've learned some really good skills here as we go along, but let's move on to the next part of the video. Okay, so now we've completed a whole group of PDFs saved of our pattern laid out the way that we want. We now want to combine all of those PDFs into one single PDF that we can save later, so that whenever we want to cut out this pattern, all we have to do is pull up a single PDF, print all the pages, and away we go. To do that, there are a lot of ways to combine PDFs into one PDF. Adobe has products that do it, but they're all paid products. But I did find one that is free to use, at least for this particular option that we want to do, and that's called PDF 24 Creator. Okay, and just the tool that we want to use in this particular software is free to use. So we click the download button, and we get an option here of three different options. So we're going to choose private because, you know, most of you are hobby users not using this for business. We click on that, and it's telling us the download is started. Okay, now we want to save that to a place. In this case, I'm just going to save it to the desktop, and it's downloaded. Then once it's downloaded, I am going to come over to the left here, and I'm going to click on that, and that's going to give me an option. This is Windows 10. It'll be slightly different if it's Windows 7. Click Yes. It's going to ask me if I accept the agreement. I'm dragging things onto the screen, as you can see, because I got two screens here, guys. Next, and then next again. And I don't want to set it as my default PDF reader because I'm using Adobe Acrobat Reader, and that'll be a little bit confusing, but you can if you want to. Install. Automatically close applications. And it's saying removing old version for me because I had another version of it. Okay, and I'm just going to skip the registration here for a minute. I'm going to go Run PDF. And this is what we've got here. So I'm going to minimize everything. And you can see that we've got a bunch of options when we run the program. And what we're going to want to use is File Tools. And once again, I will drag that on. Now you can see where it says Join here. Okay, what we want to do now is bring in all our PDFs and combine them into a PDF. So we're going to come over to the left here and just click Add File. Okay, and we are going to navigate to the desktop, Paul's videos, scroll saw tutorial, and here's our 3 pages. Now you're going to have a whole lot more, but for this example, I'm going to just select those. So I think if I hold down the Shift key, I should be able to select them all at once. Go Open, so it puts them all in there. Okay, and then I'm going to go Join. And you can see here that it's joined them all. Once it's done, it's going to ask you what quality you want. I'm going to say I want high quality. And it's asking me now for a name. Okay, and I'm going to call it Dino. Dino and hit save, and it's going to carry out its process and do that. So once it's done that, I can then zip across to my, you can see Dino here where I saved it, and if I double click that, I'm going to open that in Adobe Acrobat. Okay, so you can see that page. Here's one of the pages with the registration marks. Here's the other page with the registration marks, and when we print that out, we're going to be able to use these registration marks to line those two pieces up so we can get them perfectly laid out for our piece of paper. And of course, the other parts, I mean, they're not full up with things because I was just using it as an example, but all the other parts that would fit on the page, and all of this is in one single PDF. Okay, guys? So that's pretty much it. If you follow this tutorial, you should be able to use our patterns with your scroll saw. You should also be able to do a whole lot of other things with Inkscape with some of the new tools that you've learned. And if you've got questions or you need more information, just let me know and I'll try and make another tutorial for you. I'm going to make other tutorials about Inkscape and scroll saws as time goes by, but I thought this one was pretty critical so that our scroll saw users can more easily use our patterns successfully. These methods are really good for not only for Make CNC patterns. These methods are really good for all sorts of different type of pattern manipulation. So learning these processes is just plain good. So we'll see you next time. Hey, and thanks for watching, and thanks for supporting Make CNC and Laser Scroll and Make CNC TV. Don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to go and like our Facebook pages and join our Make CNC Workshops group. Hey, we'll see you next time, folks. Bye for now.